Well, you know the bug has really hit me, my friends, when I record 2 of these spoken word ditties on the same day. So here's the second one for July 8th, 2014, something like that. Anyway, they tell you that doing these spoken word things, you should speak of what you know. So tonight I'm going to kind of rip open the veil or take back the curtain or whatever you want about a job I had when I was in high school. Or sorry, not high school, in university. See, I did many things when I was in university to make ends meet, for my spending money, however you want to put it. I worked in a burger hut on the campus of the university that I attended for a while. And always having been into physical fitness and not really getting a t-shirt, a staff shirt in my size, at this particular place called Got Fries, I was busy working one day, and the shirt was kind of pulled tight over me, and the manager of the campus pub, the Zoo, walked by and said to me, "How come you're working here and not working for me?" And I didn't really have a good answer for him. So he said, "Well, come by Friday night and give bouncing the bar a try, see what you think, and maybe you'll like bouncing." Well, that was the start of what I consider to be my real career, basically. Typically I worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights at the campus pub, sometimes other nights as well if there was a special event going on. I really enjoyed my time working as a bouncer at the Zoo pub at this particular university, because I worked with some really good people and had some really fabulous experiences. And just to you know, pull back the curtains a bit and rip the lid off bouncing. Bouncers are very rarely, you know, the grizzled old tough guys that everyone thinks. Usually bouncers are, most of the guys I work with anyway, they're students. They're people who have other jobs in the community and are seeking to supplement it. I knew one fella who bounced for 8 months and then quit because he was trying to put together enough money to make a down payment on his house. I don't know if he ever did, but that was his goal. I bounced with a school teacher. He taught grade 6 at various places in the province of Alberta, and liked bouncing because he liked the club environment. You see, that's one of the big advantages of bouncing, is you get to be at the club and be in on the party, if you will, but you're not drinking, you're not spending money, you're actually earning money for being there. So it was an ideal job for a teetotaler like me. I think I could count on both hands the number of times that I've been under the influence in my whole life. And I'd like to keep it that way, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a great time at the bar, which I was able to do when I worked as a bouncer. At the Zoo, we probably had a few more people than we actually needed. In any place, you typically want to have 2 guys at the front door checking IDs when you're letting people in, and if the head of security winds up anywhere, as people tend to wind up doing their jobs, he wants to wind up at the front door. Then we would have 6 to 8 of us inside the club itself, and another guy at the back door, you know, in case somebody tried to sneak out the back door. The Zoo had both a front door and a back door and a long exterior hallway that you could hang around in and cool off and everything before going to the bathroom or on your way from the bathroom and this sort of thing. And there would be a lot of people hanging out in there, and we needed people in that hallway because having patrons there was a fire hazard. So we typically had some bar staff there. Now what happened was I got to like bouncing and went to work at a community, like a club, a dance club out in the community in the city where I was going to university. And this place was called Razorbacks. It was a new startup, so they were kind of putting things together as best they could. Now there were a lot of guys that were associated with Razorbacks that had previous club experience. My immediate supervisor, the operations manager, was a fellow named Carl Duffy. And Carl had a lot of experience as a bouncer, but he decided that he wanted to make the clubs his career. So what he'd done is he'd gone and learned some club management skills. He'd read up on it. He was a regular subscriber to Hospitality Industry magazine, and to my great surprise, there are magazines for just about everything. Carl read this one, and he had a lot of interesting tips and tricks and everything else to make Razorbacks go. So we went and we really pushed hard to try and make Razorbacks go, but the original management team got phased out of Razorbacks after about 6 months. And a lot of us that were hired when it was starting up, we were very loyal to the original management team, so when it went, we went. And what had happened is, in this particular city there was another bar. It was sort of the premier night spot in the city, and it was called the Roadhouse. At the time, the Roadhouse had a reputation as the fight bar. If you wanted the rough stuff, if you wanted really gritty entertainments, that sort of thing, you went to the Roadhouse. Carl had learned his trade in the Roadhouse, so he was forever telling us stories about it. The Roadhouse put on an annual no-holds-barred fighting competition called the Roadhouse Rumble. I went to that once as a patron, and I worked it as security on 2 occasions. And if you thought you were of bad news, you should try being security when there's a room full of mixed martial arts fighters. It's quite an experience, I assure you. But I met some fabulous people and had some really good times, and what more can I say about that? So when the original management team was phased out of Razorbacks, some of them were bought out, others quit, and so forth, I saw the writing on the wall, and I went to work at the Roadhouse. The Roadhouse was an interesting experience. It was the longest continuous employment that I've ever had, other than when I sawmilled to put myself through university in the first place. The Roadhouse, it was an unusual place to work because your work there placed you in actual physical danger. When you went to work there, you didn't know what was going to happen. I have had whiskey bottles broken over my head. I mixed it up with 6 people on one, 6 guys coming after me at the Roadhouse, and I loved every minute of it. The Roadhouse is the only job I have ever had that I would consider doing for free, okay, unpaid. You want me to work there? Fine, tell me when. The irony is, the money at the Roadhouse was the worst I've ever earned. It had the lowest hourly wage, and the tips, which are the lifeblood of anyone working in the hospitality industry, were the worst. You were on a fixed scale, so you really didn't make that much money. The only way to make money at the Roadhouse was if you had something going on the side. You were letting people in the back door, you were overcharging for drinks, that kind of thing, right? And that didn't happen very, very often at all. The Roadhouse was also an interesting place to work from the size of the security crew. I was used to working at the zoo or at Razorbacks, which had up to a dozen security personnel on any night. So you could pretty well overawe anything that was going on. You were never short of people to deal with any situation. The exact opposite was true at the Roadhouse. There were nights when there might be 2 guys at the door, the head of security, and 2 rank and file bouncers inside the club. And you were always outnumbered. So you were at the Roadhouse, it was sink or swim. You had to win, you had to prevail, or it was over. Okay, I remember working one New Year's Eve at the Roadhouse when the Roadhouse legal capacity was 750 people. This New Year's Eve there was 1,400 people, and the only 2 people in there to keep a lid on things were me and another person. So that should give you some idea of the typical staffing levels at the Roadhouse. And as I say, the Roadhouse was great. It was an incredible amount of fun. I loved it. And I made a mistake when I went to work at the Roadhouse. Or the Roadhouse was sort of the period at the end of a sentence that comprised my mistake. You see, a bouncer never loses a fight, because if you beat one bouncer, his 5 friends are going to make sure that you don't win. So you always have backup. The worst that can happen to you is a draw. So what happens is, knowing that you can never lose a fight, you become very, very overconfident, and you actually get to like it. And this was the mistake that I made. I got to like fighting, which is a very unhealthy thing because it causes you to shut off part of your brain as you're solving problems. You think, well, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to mix it up with this guy because I can win the fight that will happen hands down. He can't beat me. okay? And this is another piece of, you know, looking behind the curtain, ripping the lid off, bouncing. You can never intimidate a bouncer. I don't care who you are. You might be a full-patch Hell's Angel with a machine gun in your back pocket. You will never intimidate the bouncer of any club you're in. Not only is he someone not to be trifled with on his own, but if the club is functioning properly, he has at least 3 willing and able friends to back him up, whatever might happen. And further, on top of that, most properly functioning clubs, the male bartenders have been promoted out of the ranks of the bouncers. So they're all tough guys too. So maybe this is a lesson to anyone who's going to go to a club and make trouble. You cannot beat the bouncers. You maybe you can beat 1 or 2, but you can't beat them all, okay? Most of the time the bouncers are scared out of their minds anyway. In say a 4-hour shift, it would be 3 hours and 45 minutes of boredom and 15 minutes of sheer terror. Okay, a lot of bouncers will be, as was the case with me, will play contact sports like rugby or football or ice hockey, and will be avid weightlifters, avid physical fitness. I knew a lot of guys that studied the martial arts and also worked as bouncers, and I knew guys that had combat training as a result of their occupation, ex-military, ex-police, things like that. So they're not learning those skills because they want to be rough and tough and, you know, don't screw with me, that sort of thing. They're learning it just to survive. That's why I started studying the martial arts when I worked as a bouncer, because I wanted to survive. I didn't want to get some unpleasant surprise. And thankfully, I never did. Apart from that whiskey bottle that got broken over my head, but that's a story for another day. So then what happened is the Roadhouse came under new management, new owner management, and the new broom sweeps clean, and a lot of the old staff, especially the troublesome members of the staff, were let go. And I was viewed as one of the troublesome members of the staff because I learned bouncing from very experienced older fellas, like this Carl Duffy fellow that I mentioned, and a few others. And the old school or traditional way of fixing problems in the bar was you started cracking heads, and you kept cracking heads until the problem was resolved. That wasn't how the new management wanted things to handle, and that isn't new modern bouncing. New modern bouncing is you're using holds and you're negotiating with people, you're talking to people. The debate remains as to which is the more effective way, but certainly fewer people get hurt with new style. This begs the question, maybe there's some people out there who need to get hurt, but we won't discuss that right now. So I was out of work for a little while after the Roadhouse let me go, but then, surprise, surprise, a new bar started up in the old Roadhouse, in the old Razorbacks building. And this was called Club Spin, and as I discovered, it was part of a chain. There were Club Spin in a number of other cities on the prairies. So I went to work there for a while, but the money just wasn't what I wanted it to be, and I'd grown kind of cold on the idea of bouncing. So I resigned my position at Spin and moved back to my hometown in this wonderful metropolis that you see around you. The last taste of bouncing I got was when I briefly bounced a place here in Cranbrook called Monarchs. That premises is currently occupied with a local Royal Canadian Legion chapter, but for a while it was a big city nightclub, if you will, with big city problems including Hells Angels and gangs and everything else. And again, the two forces of just having had enough of working in the nightclub industry and liking fighting too much caused me to resign. Bouncing, if bouncing works properly, it is the best job you can have, and if it doesn't work properly, it's the worst job you can have. You need to get in with a good crew, and the last good crew that I worked with was at the Roadhouse. So probably good that I moved on from there.